What started as an exclusive speed dating event in Manhattan's most expensive penthouse ended with sirens, tears, and one stranger who changed everything. But this isn't the story you think it is. The crystal chandelier cast rainbow patterns across the marble floor of Vincent Caldwell's penthouse as catering staff made final adjustments to the intimate speed dating setup. 12 round tables, each adorned with white orchids and flickering candles, were arranged throughout the expansive living room that overlooked Central Park. Vincent straightened his Italian silk tie for the third time, his fingers trembling slightly, a nervous habit he developed since his wife Elizabeth passed away 2 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dad, you don't have to do this. The soft voice belonged to his daughter Sophia, who stood partially hidden behind the kitchen doorway. At 17, she possessed her mother's delicate features and the same deep brown eyes that had first captivated Vincent 20 years ago. But where Elizabeth had been confident and vivacious, Sophia was cautious, often overwhelmed by the simplest social interactions. Vincent turned toward her, his expression gentle but determined. "Sophie, sweetheart, we've talked about this. It's time for both of us to start living again." The truth was more complicated. Vincent's sister Margaret had orchestrated this evening after months of watching her brother isolate himself in work and grief. As the founder and CEO of Caldwell Innovations, a tech company specializing in artificial intelligence, Vincent had thrown himself into 16-hour days, emerging only for Sophia's therapy appointments and the occasional family dinner. Margaret worried that Sophia was following the same pattern, retreating further into herself with each passing month. But what if they're only interested in your money? Sophia's voice was barely audible, a whisper that carried the weight of years spent watching people approach their family with ulterior motives. Vincent crossed the room and knelt beside his daughter, taking her hands in his. "Then I'll know they're not right for us. But Sophie, some people are genuine. Your mother taught me that." The doorbell's elegant chime interrupted their moment. Vincent squeezed Sophia's hands once more before answering. The first woman to arrive was Clarissa Montenegro, a striking blonde in her early 30s wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She swept into the penthouse with practiced confidence, her eyes quickly cataloging the expensive artwork and custom furniture. "Vincent, what an absolutely stunning home. That Monet in the foyer, is it original?" Her voice carried the polished tone of someone accustomed to high society gatherings. "It is. Thank you for noticing." Vincent accepted her air-kiss greeting, noting how her gaze lingered on the price tags rather than the beauty of the pieces. The next 30 minutes brought a parade of accomplished women. Drive. Patricia Wellesley, a successful surgeon with impeccable credentials. Amanda Cross, a real estate mogul who'd sold Vincent his vacation home in the Hamptons. Jessica Liu, a renowned art curator from the Metropolitan Museum, and 8 others, each impressive in their own right. Sophia retreated to her bedroom as the penthouse filled with laughter and conversation, but she couldn't help watching from her slightly cracked door. The women were beautiful, successful, and articulate, everything she felt she wasn't. Each seemed to glide through conversations with her father with an ease that Sophia envied and feared in equal measure. The speed dating format allowed 7 minutes per interaction, with Vincent rotating between tables. The conversations followed predictable patterns: career achievements, travel experiences, shared interests in wine and art. Several women mentioned their love of children in carefully worded phrases that felt rehearsed rather than genuine. It was during his conversation with Dr. Wellesley that Vincent noticed the commotion at table 7. Rachel Martinez, a quiet elementary school teacher who'd arrived last and seemed somewhat out of place among the other women, had spilled red wine across the white tablecloth. She was frantically trying to clean it up with her napkin, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Don't worry about it," Vincent called over. "The staff will handle it." But several of the other women had turned to watch, their expressions ranging from amused to disdainful. Clarissa's laugh was particularly cutting. "Some people just don't belong in nice places," she murmured to Jessica, though her voice carried clearly across the room. Rachel's face went crimson. She stood abruptly, gathering her purse. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Caldwell. I should go." "Please, there's no need," Vincent began, but Rachel was already heading toward the door. What happened next surprised everyone, including Vincent. Sophia emerged from her bedroom, moving faster than she had in months. she intercepted Rachel near the elevator. "Wait," Sophia said, her voice stronger than usual. "You don't have to leave because of them." Rachel paused, studying the teenager with gentle eyes. There was something familiar in Sophia's expression, a recognition of what it felt like to be the outsider, to feel like you didn't quite fit in the spaces others occupied so effortlessly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Sometimes we end up in places we don't really belong." Rachel's voice was kind, without a trace of self-pity. "But you do belong," Sophia insisted. "You're the only one here who hasn't spent the whole night trying to impress my dad with expensive things or fancy accomplishments. You're the only one who seems real." Vincent watched this exchange from across the room, his heart tightening. It was the most he'd heard Sophia speak to a stranger in over a year. Rachel glanced back at the penthouse, where the speed dating continued without missing a beat. The other women had already dismissed the interruption and returned to their conversations with Vincent's rotating schedule. But something in Sophia's earnest expression made her pause. "What's your name?" Rachel asked gently. "Sophia. But everyone calls me Sophie." "Well, Sophie, I'm Rachel, and you know what? You're absolutely right. I am real. Sometimes being real means knowing when to walk away, and sometimes it means staying when someone needs you to." She looked at the teenager more carefully. "Are you okay? You seem scared," Sophia finished. "Yeah, I am, all the time, actually." Vincent had abandoned his conversation with Amanda Cross, and was now close enough to hear their exchange. His heart broke a little at his daughter's admission, even though her therapist had prepared him for these moments of honesty. Rachel's expression softened further. "Scared of what?" "Everything. New people, social situations. The idea that my dad might find someone and I'll have to pretend to be okay with having a stepmother who probably thinks I'm weird and broken." The words tumbled out of Sophia in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for months. The penthouse had grown quieter, and Vincent realized that the other conversations had paused. Several of the women were watching this unexpected drama unfold, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. This wasn't the sophisticated evening they'd signed up for. Rachel didn't seem to notice the audience. Her attention was entirely focused on Sophia. "You're not weird or broken, Sophie. You're just figuring things out, and that's perfectly normal. Can I tell you a secret?" Sophia nodded. "I'm scared too. I came here tonight because my sister convinced me to try dating again after my divorce. But honestly, I felt completely out of place from the moment I walked in. I teach 3rd grade, I drive a Honda Civic, and I got this dress from Target. I was terrified that everyone would see right through me." Quote, "But you seemed so calm," Sophia said. "That's just practice. When you're scared a lot, you get good at hiding it." Rachel smiled sadly. "But maybe hiding isn't always the answer. Maybe sometimes the scariest thing is also the right thing." It was then that the evening took an unexpected turn. Dr. Wellesley, who had been waiting for Vincent to return to their conversation, cleared her throat loudly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being heard, "but this is supposed to be an adult evening. Perhaps the child should return to her room so we can continue." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vincent's jaw tightened, and several of the other women looked uncomfortable. But before he could respond, Rachel stepped forward. "Her name is Sophie," Rachel said quietly, but with unmistakable steel in her voice. "And this is her home. If anyone should be excusing themselves, it might be the person who just called a 17-year-old girl the child in her own living room." Dr. Wellesley's eyes flashed. "I hardly think someone of your background is in a position to lecture me on appropriate behavior." The insult hung in the air like a physical presence. Vincent felt his hands clench into fists, but again Rachel spoke before he could. "You're absolutely right," she said calmly. "I'm just a public school teacher from Queens. I don't have a medical degree or a trust fund or a house in the Hamptons, but I do know that kindness costs nothing. And tonight you've chosen to be cruel to a teenage girl who's already struggling. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent watched as his daughter straightened her shoulders, something shifting in her expression. For the first time in months, Sophia looked genuinely proud. Not of herself, but of the woman standing beside her. "I think," Vincent said finally, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had built his business empire, that this evening has run its course. The exodus began immediately. Dr. Wellesley gathered her designer purse with sharp, precise movements, her face flushed with indignation. "I don't think this environment is conducive to meaningful connections," she announced to no one in particular, though her eyes remained fixed on Rachel with undisguised contempt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Clarissa Montenegro was quick to follow, her earlier charm replaced by cold calculation. "Vincent, darling, perhaps we should reschedule when you can focus properly on the adults in the room." Her dismissive glance toward Sophia carried enough venom to kill a small animal. One by one, the other women began making their excuses. Amanda Cross muttered something about an early morning appointment. Jessica Liu suddenly remembered a gallery opening she couldn't miss. Within 15 minutes, the penthouse that had been filled with sophisticated laughter and clinking wine glasses was nearly empty. Only Rachel remained, standing awkwardly near the elevator as the catering staff began clearing tables with practiced efficiency. "You don't have to stay," Vincent said, though his tone suggested he hoped she would. "I'm sorry the evening ended so poorly." Rachel looked at Sophia, who had retreated slightly but was still watching from beside the kitchen doorway. The teenager's earlier burst of confidence seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind the familiar anxiety that had become her constant companion. "Actually," Rachel said, glancing at her watch, "it's only 8:30. The night doesn't have to be over." She turned to Sophia. "What do you usually do on Friday evenings?" Sophia shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about the loneliness of her routine. "Homework, Netflix. Sometimes I read." "What kind of books?" "Fantasy, mostly. Right now, I'm reading this series about a girl who can travel between dimensions, but she's afraid to use her power, because every time she does, she might get stuck somewhere she doesn't belong." Rachel's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. That sounds like a metaphor for something deeper. For the first time all evening, Sophia's face lit up with enthusiasm. "That's exactly what I thought. Like, maybe the author is saying that growth requires risk, and sometimes you have to leave your comfort zone even if it's scary." Vincent watched this exchange with growing amazement. His daughter, who had barely spoken to her therapist, Dr. Morrison, during their first 6 sessions, was engaging in literary analysis with a woman she'd met 20 minutes ago. "Sophie has always been insightful about books," Vincent offered. "Her English teacher says she has a gift for understanding subtext." Quote, "But you're homeschooled now, right?" Rachel asked gently. Sophia's enthusiasm dimmed. "Since last year, after Mom died, regular school became too much. Too many people, too much noise, too many questions about why I was crying all the time." The honesty was startling in its simplicity. Vincent felt his chest tighten. Even after months of therapy, hearing Sophia articulate her pain so directly still caught him off guard. Rachel nodded without judgment. "Grief is loud, even when you're trying to be quiet about it. Sometimes it feels like everyone can hear it, even when you think you're hiding it well." "Yes." Sophia stepped closer, her voice gaining strength. "That's exactly it. It's like there's this constant noise in your head, but you're supposed to pretend everything is normal. Have you tried expressing it creatively? Writing? Art? Music?" Sophia shook her head. "I used to paint with Mom, but I haven't touched my easel since she died. Dad bought me new supplies for my birthday last month, but they're still in the packaging." Vincent's heart clenched. He'd hoped the art supplies might encourage Sophia to reconnect with something she'd once loved, but he hadn't wanted to pressure her. Now he wondered if his hands-off approach had been the right choice. "Would you show me your old paintings?" Rachel asked. "Only if you want to, of course." Sophia hesitated, glancing at her father. Vincent nodded encouragingly, though he held his breath. Sophia's art had been a source of joy for both mother and daughter, and she'd been talented beyond her years. But the paintings were stored in her bedroom, a space she'd made increasingly private since Elizabeth's death. "They're not very good," Sophia said finally, but she was already walking toward the hallway. Rachel followed, leaving Vincent alone in the vast living room. He could hear their voices drifting from Sophia's bedroom, his daughter's initially hesitant explanations growing more animated as she described her techniques and inspiration. It was the most sustained conversation Sophia had maintained with anyone outside the family since the funeral. Vincent found himself studying Rachel's abandoned wine glass, still sitting on table 7 beside the stained tablecloth. Everything about her presence tonight had been unexpected. She hadn't asked about his business or his net worth. She hadn't complimented his home or dropped hints about expensive restaurants. Instead, she'd seen his daughter's pain and responded with genuine compassion. 20 minutes later, Rachel and Sophia emerged from the bedroom, Sophia carrying a small canvas that she'd kept hidden from her father for months. The painting showed a garden in winter, bare trees reaching toward a gray sky, but with tiny buds visible on the branches, suggesting the promise of spring. Sophie painted this 3 weeks after her mother's funeral, Rachel explained to Vincent. She says she didn't know why she chose that subject, but now she thinks it might have been her subconscious processing hope and renewal. Vincent stared at the painting, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and somehow hopeful all at once. "Sophie, this is extraordinary. Why didn't you show me?" "Because I painted it on one of your bad days," Sophia said quietly. "You were crying in your office, and I didn't want to make you sadder." The admission hit Vincent like a physical blow. He'd thought he'd been hiding his grief from Sophia, protecting her from the full weight of his own pain. Instead, she'd been protecting him, carrying her own healing journey in secret. Rachel must have sensed the intensity of the moment because she stepped back slightly, giving father and daughter space. But Sophia surprised them both by turning toward her. "Would you like to see the rest of them?" Sophia asked. "I have 7 more hidden in my closet." What followed was an impromptu art exhibition in the penthouse living room. Sophia retrieved painting after painting, each one revealing another layer of her emotional journey over the past 2 years. There were dark canvases from the early months, storms and shadows and empty rooms, but gradually the paintings began to incorporate light. Sunrise through windows, flowers pushing through concrete, portraits of her father laughing at memories only he could see. Rachel studied each piece with the attention of a professional critic, asking thoughtful questions about color choices and composition. She didn't offer empty praise or patronizing encouragement. Instead, she engaged with Sophia's work as if it came from an equal, someone whose artistic vision deserved serious consideration. "This one," Rachel said, pausing in front of a painting of 2 figures sitting on a park bench, "this feels different from the others." Sophia blushed. "I painted it last month after Dad agreed to try dating again. I was scared he'd find someone who would want him to forget Mom completely. But then I realized maybe I was also scared he'd find someone who would want me to forget her too." "And now?" Vincent asked gently. Sophia looked at Rachel, who was still studying the painting with thoughtful concentration. "Now I think maybe the right person would understand that loving someone new doesn't mean erasing someone you've lost." The weight of those words settled over the room like a blessing. Vincent felt something shift inside his chest. Not the absence of grief, but the possibility that grief and hope could coexist. Rachel turned from the painting to face both of them. "You know what strikes me most about your art, Sophie? It's honest about pain, but it's not hopeless. That's a rare gift. Mom used to say that art should tell the truth, even when the truth is complicated. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Vincent said, speaking Elizabeth's memory into the space between them. "She would have liked you, Rachel. She would have appreciated how you see Sophie, really see her." The evening had transformed into something none of them had expected. The speed dating event was forgotten, replaced by genuine connection and the kind of conversation that emerges when people lower their carefully constructed walls. As the city lights twinkled beyond the penthouse windows, Vincent found himself thinking that maybe his sister Margaret had been right about needing to start living again. But perhaps she'd been wrong about the method. The catering staff had long since departed, leaving the 3 of them surrounded by Sophia's paintings in the soft glow of the penthouse's ambient lighting. Vincent had ordered Chinese takeout, a decision that amused Rachel, considering they were sitting in a multi-million-dollar apartment eating lo mein from cardboard containers. "I haven't had takeout Chinese in months," Sophia admitted, expertly maneuvering her chopsticks. "Dad usually has his chef prepare everything." "Sometimes the best meals come from the most unexpected places," Rachel said, then paused, realizing the double meaning of her words in the context of their evening. Vincent caught the implication and smiled, the first genuine smile Rachel had seen from him all night. "Speaking of unexpected places, I have to ask, what made you come tonight? Margaret mentioned you weren't exactly enthusiastic about the idea. Quote, Rachel set down her chopsticks, considering her answer carefully. Honestly? My sister Carmen has been worried about me since my divorce was finalized 6 months ago. She thinks I've become too isolated, too focused on my students, and not enough on my own life. She gestured around the opulent space. This definitely wasn't what I had in mind when she suggested I start dating again. What happened with your marriage? Sophia asked with the directness that only teenagers could manage. If you don't mind me asking. Vincent started to chide his daughter for being too personal, but Rachel held up a hand. It's okay. My ex-husband David was a good man, but we wanted different things. He was ambitious. Investment banking, 60-hour weeks, plans for a house in Connecticut, and private schools for kids we didn't even have yet. I just wanted to teach and maybe travel during summers and adopt a rescue dog. Those don't sound incompatible, Vincent observed. They weren't, until David got promoted to senior partner and decided my job was quaint and that I should consider something more suitable for his position. He suggested I quit teaching and focus on charity work, the kind where you organize galas but don't actually get your hands dirty helping people. Sophia wrinkled her nose. That sounds awful. It was. The final straw came when he told me we couldn't adopt a dog because it might damage the furniture in our new penthouse. Rachel laughed, but there was sadness in it. I realized I'd rather be alone with a rescue mutt than married to someone who saw my compassion as a character flaw. Vincent found himself studying Rachel with new appreciation. In his world, ambition was currency, and success was measured in quarterly reports and stock prices. But here was someone who had chosen principle over security, authenticity over advancement. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Leaving? Never. Sometimes I regret the time I wasted trying to become someone I wasn't. But that's different. Rachel looked directly at him. I imagine you understand something about that. The pressure to be who others expect you to be, rather than who you actually are. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Vincent had spent the past 2 years being the grieving widower, the devoted father, the successful CEO, all roles that were true but incomplete. Tonight was the first time in months he'd felt like himself rather than a collection of other people's expectations. What about you, Sophie? Rachel asked. What do you want to be when you grow up? And please don't say, I don't know. I get that answer from my third graders, and you're much more insightful than that. Sophia considered the question seriously. I think I want to be an art therapist. Like, help people process trauma and emotions through creative expression. My own therapist is great. But sometimes talking isn't enough. Sometimes you need to paint the feeling or sculpt it or write it into existence. Vincent felt a surge of pride mixed with surprise. Sophia had never articulated this ambition before, at least not to him. That's a beautiful calling, Rachel said. Have you researched the educational requirements? Some. I'd need to finish high school, obviously, then get a bachelor's degree in psychology or art, then a master's in art therapy. It's a lot of school, but I think it would be worth it. Your mother would be proud, Vincent said softly. She always believed art could heal. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, the mention of her name didn't cast a shadow over the room. Instead, it felt like an invitation, as if her memory was blessing this unexpected connection rather than haunting it. The conversation drifted to other topics. As the evening deepened, Rachel shared stories from her classroom. 8-year-olds who wrote poetry about their pet hamsters and drew elaborate maps of imaginary kingdoms. Vincent found himself talking about the early days of his company, when he and his 2 college roommates worked 18-hour days in a garage, surviving on pizza and stubborn determination. Sophia listened to these stories with fascination, seeing her father not as the grief-stricken widower or the intimidating CEO, but as someone who had once been young and uncertain and willing to take risks for something he believed in. What's the biggest risk you ever took? Sophia asked him. Vincent thought for a moment. Proposing to your mother. I was 26, barely making enough money to pay rent. And she was this brilliant, beautiful woman who could have had anyone. I was terrified she'd say no. But she said yes. She said yes, but not right away. She told me she needed to think about it because she didn't want me to propose out of fear of losing her. She wanted to make sure I was proposing because I couldn't imagine my life without her. Rachel smiled. Smart woman. What convinced her? I wrote her a letter explaining the difference. I told her that fear of loss is about what you're trying to avoid, but love is about what you're trying to build. I said I didn't want to marry her because I was afraid of being alone. I wanted to marry her because I couldn't wait to see what we could create together. The words hung in the air with unexpected weight. Vincent realized he was describing not just his past with Elizabeth, but potentially his future with someone new. Someone who understood that love didn't require erasing the past, but building on its foundation. It was nearly midnight when Rachel finally looked at her phone. I should probably head home. I have papers to grade tomorrow and you both need your sleep. But as she gathered her purse, Sophia spoke up with sudden urgency. Wait. There's something I want to ask you. Rachel paused, sensing the importance of whatever was coming. Would you? Sophia hesitated, then pushed forward with the courage that had emerged throughout the evening. Would you maybe come back sometime? Not for a date or anything formal. Just to hang out. Maybe you could help me set up my easel again. I think I'm ready to start painting, but I'm scared to do it alone. The request was so heartfelt, so vulnerable, that Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. I would love that, Sophie. I would absolutely love that. Vincent watched this exchange with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, a recognition that sometimes the most important connections happen not in spite of complications, but because of them. Rachel hadn't run from Sophia's anxiety or his grief. Instead, she'd seen their family's brokenness and chosen to stay, to engage, to care. Actually, Vincent said, surprising himself with his boldness, what are you doing Sunday? We usually spend the afternoon at the Met. It was something Elizabeth started, and we've kept up the tradition. But it's been feeling more like an obligation lately than something we enjoy. Maybe it needs fresh eyes, Rachel suggested. Someone who can see the art without carrying all the weight of memory. Exactly. Rachel looked between father and daughter, seeing not a wealthy CEO and his troubled teenager, but two people learning to heal together, learning to let new light into spaces that had been dark for too long. Sunday at the Met sounds perfect, she said. As Vincent walked Rachel to the elevator, Sophia disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small canvas, one of the hopeful paintings from later in her series. I want you to have this, she said, offering Rachel the painting of sunrise through a window. As a thank you for seeing me tonight, really see me. Rachel accepted the gift with trembling hands, understanding that this was more than artwork. It was trust, hope, and the beginning of something precious. Sophie, this is beautiful. Are you sure? I'm sure. Besides, I think I'm ready to paint new ones now, ones that include more people in the frame. After Rachel left, father and daughter stood together in the quiet penthouse, surrounded by the evidence of an evening that had transformed from disaster into possibility. Dad? Sophia said as they began putting away her paintings. Yes, sweetheart? I think Mom would have liked her. Rachel, I mean. She's nothing like what I expected when you said you were ready to date again. Vincent considered this carefully. What did you expect? Someone who would want you to be different. Someone who would see me as a problem to solve or an obstacle to work around. Rachel saw us as we are and decided we were worth staying for. The wisdom in his daughter's observation took Vincent's breath away. Sophia was right. Rachel had seen their complicated reality and chosen engagement over escape, connection over convenience. I think you're right about what Mom would have thought, Vincent said. She always said the right people don't try to fix you. They see your broken places and love you anyway. As they turned off the lights and headed toward their bedrooms, both father and daughter felt something they hadn't experienced in 2 years. Excitement about the future. Not because their grief was gone or their challenges solved, but because they were no longer facing them alone. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. 3 weeks later, Sophia's easel stood in the corner of the penthouse living room, no longer hidden away, but part of the family's daily life. Her latest painting showed 3 figures walking through the halls of a museum. A man, a woman, and a teenager, their faces turned toward something beautiful just outside the frame. When Vincent asked what they were looking at, Sophia smiled and said, tomorrow. Quote, Rachel had become a regular presence in their lives, not as Vincent's girlfriend. They were taking that slowly, building friendship first. But as someone who understood that healing happens in community, that love multiplies rather than divides, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most unexpected encounters. The speed dating event had lasted less than 2 hours, but its impact would last a lifetime, not because it went according to plan, but because it didn't. In the space between expectation and reality, between fear and courage, between isolation and connection, a new kind of family was being born. And in her bedroom that night, Sophia began sketching plans for her next painting, a garden in full bloom, with room for everyone who chose to stay and help it grow. The following months unfolded like chapters in a novel none of them had expected to write. Rachel's presence in their lives became as natural as breathing, woven into the fabric of their routines without overwhelming the delicate balance they'd spent 2 years creating. She never tried to replace Elizabeth's memory or claim a space that wasn't freely offered. Instead, she carved out her own unique place in their world, one built on understanding, patience, and genuine affection. Vincent found himself rediscovering parts of himself he'd forgotten existed. With Rachel, he could discuss books without worrying about quarterly projections, debate the merits of different coffee shops without calculating their market potential, and laugh at terrible movies without analyzing their production budgets. She reminded him that success wasn't just about building something that lasted, it was about experiencing joy in the process. Their first official date happened almost by accident. Vincent had planned to take Sophia to a pottery class, part of her expanding comfort zone initiative, but she came down with the flu the morning of the workshop. When he called to cancel, the instructor mentioned they had a strict no-refund policy for same-day cancellations. "I could go with you," Rachel offered when he mentioned the predicament during their daily phone call. It had become routine for them to talk each evening after Sophia went to bed, conversations that meandered through everything, from current events to childhood memories, to philosophical debates about whether cereal was soup. "You want to make pottery?" Vincent asked, amused. "I want to keep you from losing money on something Sophia was excited about. Plus, I haven't touched clay since college, and I have fond memories of creating very lopsided bowls." The pottery studio was tucked into a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, filled with natural light and the earthy smell of wet clay. Vincent felt ridiculously out of place in his tailored shirt and Italian leather shoes, surrounded by artists in paint-stained aprons and students in comfortable jeans. "Relax," Rachel murmured, tying her hair back with a scrunchie she'd pulled from her purse. "Clay doesn't care about your net worth." She was right, of course. The pottery wheel was the great equalizer. Everyone's first attempts were disasters, regardless of their professional achievements or bank account balances. Vincent's initial bowl collapsed into a sad puddle within minutes, sending clay flying across his expensive shirt. "You're fighting it," Rachel observed, her own hands steady as she shaped what was becoming a recognizable mug. "Clay responds to gentle guidance, not force. You can't control it into submission." The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Vincent had spent his entire adult life believing that success came from determination and control, from bending circumstances to his will through sheer force of effort. But grief had taught him the limits of control, and now Rachel was showing him the power of surrender. By the end of the 2-hour session, Vincent had managed to create something vaguely bowl-shaped, while Rachel had produced a charming mug with a slightly crooked handle. They left their pieces to be fired, planning to return the following week to paint them. "That was surprisingly therapeutic," Vincent admitted as they walked through Prospect Park afterward, their hands and clothes still bearing traces of clay despite multiple washings. "There's something honest about working with your hands," Rachel agreed. "You can't fake your way through it or delegate it to someone else. It's just you and the material, figuring it out together." They found a small cafe and ordered coffee, settling into a corner booth as the afternoon sun streamed through vintage windows. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, Vincent found himself completely present in a moment rather than planning the next one or analyzing the previous one. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said, stirring honey into her latte. "Anything." "What scares you most about this? About us, I mean." Quote. The question was direct, but not confrontational, asked with the same gentle curiosity she brought to her conversations with Sophia. Vincent considered deflecting with humor or changing the subject, but Rachel's honesty deserved his own. "That I'm not ready," he said finally. "That I'm asking you to care about damaged people who might never be completely whole again. That you'll wake up one day and realize you signed up for something much more complicated than you bargained for." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "Those are valid fears. Can I tell you what scares me? Vincent waited. That you'll decide I'm not sophisticated enough for your world. That you'll get tired of explaining why you're dating a public school teacher from Queens instead of a surgeon or a curator or someone who looks good in the society pages. She paused, meeting his eyes. That Sophia will stop trusting me if I hurt you, and I'll lose both of you at once. The vulnerability in her admission made Vincent's chest tighten. Rachel, I need you to understand something. I've spent 2 years surrounded by people who wanted to help me network, or invest in my company, or introduce me to appropriate women. You're the first person who's cared more about my daughter's happiness than my portfolio. Sophia is remarkable, Rachel said simply. She's been through hell and somehow emerged with her compassion intact. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because she had parents who taught her that kindness matters more than success. They talked until the cafe began preparing to close, their conversation ranging from serious to silly, touching on everything from Rachel's students' latest antics to Vincent's memories of building his first computer in his college dorm room. By the time they parted ways that evening, something fundamental had shifted between them, from friendship with romantic potential to something deeper and more intentional. Sophia noticed the change immediately when Vincent returned home. You look different, she observed, glancing up from her homework spread across the kitchen island. Different how? Lighter, like you've been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. The insight was startling in its accuracy. Vincent had been carrying the weight of his own expectations, the pressure to grieve properly and parent perfectly, and somehow emerge from tragedy stronger than before. Rachel's presence wasn't taking away that weight. It was teaching him that he didn't have to carry it alone. Rachel and I went on our first real date today, he told his daughter. Sophia's face lit up with genuine pleasure. How was it? Messy. Literally, we made pottery and got clay everywhere, but it was also perfect. Good. I was starting to worry you were going to take forever to ask her out properly. She's been waiting, you know? Vincent raised an eyebrow. Has she now? And how exactly do you know that? We text sometimes. She sends me pictures of funny things her students write, and I send her photos of my paintings in progress. Yesterday she mentioned that she'd bought a new dress, but hadn't had anywhere to wear it yet. The revelation that his daughter and Rachel had developed their own independent relationship filled Vincent with unexpected joy. He'd worried that any woman he dated would feel like an intruder in their carefully constructed world, but Rachel had somehow become part of their family constellation without disturbing its balance. The dress Sophia mentioned made its appearance the following weekend when Rachel joined them for their Sunday museum tradition. She wore a flowing midi dress in deep blue that brought out her eyes, paired with comfortable walking shoes and a crossbody bag practical enough for museum exploration. You look beautiful, Vincent said when he answered the door, and meant it completely. Thank you. Sophie helped me pick it out. We went shopping yesterday afternoon. Another surprise. Sophia had barely tolerated shopping trips with Vincent's sister Margaret, but apparently she'd volunteered to spend her Saturday afternoon helping Rachel choose clothes. The Metropolitan Museum felt different with Rachel there, not because she changed their routine, but because she enhanced it. Where Vincent and Sophia had fallen into the habit of moving through exhibits with quiet reverence, Rachel asked questions that made them see familiar pieces with fresh eyes. Why do you think the artist chose to paint her hands that way? She asked Sophia as they stood before a Renaissance portrait. Sophia studied the painting more carefully. They're not quite symmetrical. One is relaxed, but the other is slightly tense. Maybe she was nervous about sitting for the portrait? Or maybe she was holding something we can't see, Rachel suggested. A letter, or a key, or something that mattered to her. Quote, these small conversations transformed their museum visits from solitary contemplation into shared discovery. Vincent watched his daughter engage with art in new ways, asking questions she'd never thought to ask, seeing stories she'd never noticed before. In the museum cafe afterward, they established a new tradition of their own, sharing dessert and debating which exhibit had been most interesting. Sophia argued passionately for the contemporary art wing, while Rachel championed the ancient Egyptian collection. Vincent found himself defending the American paintings, realizing he'd never articulated his preferences so clearly before. Next week, we should try the Frick collection, Rachel suggested. It's smaller, more intimate. Sometimes the best art viewing happens when you're not overwhelmed by choices. I've never been there, Sophia admitted. Perfect. New experiences are always better when shared with people you care about. The casual inclusion of herself in their future plans struck Vincent as both natural and revolutionary. For 2 years, he and Sophia had planned their weekends around maintaining routines that felt safe. Now they were building new traditions that included hope for tomorrow. As autumn deepened into winter, their relationship evolved with the changing seasons. Rachel's apartment became a second home for Sophia, who loved the cozy chaos of Rachel's book-filled living room and the way her small kitchen always smelled like whatever experimental recipe she was trying. Vincent found himself cooking dinner for 3 most evenings, rediscovering his enjoyment of simple domestic pleasures. The real test came in December, as the 2nd anniversary of Elizabeth's death approached. Vincent had dreaded this milestone, knowing that grief anniversaries could be unexpectedly devastating, even when you thought you'd made peace with loss. Rachel navigated the sensitive time with extraordinary grace. She didn't try to distract them from their sadness, or suggest that their healing should follow any particular timeline. Instead, she simply made herself available, bringing soup when neither of them felt like cooking, sitting quietly while Sophia painted through her emotions, and holding space for Vincent's tears without trying to fix them. On the anniversary itself, the 3 of them visited Elizabeth's grave together. Rachel brought a small bouquet of white roses and stayed several steps back, while Vincent and Sophia had their private moments of remembrance. But when Sophia asked if Rachel wanted to hear stories about her mother, Rachel settled cross-legged on the cold ground and listened with complete attention as Sophia shared memories of Elizabeth's terrible singing voice and her addiction to romantic comedies and her fierce protectiveness when Sophia was bullied in elementary school. "She sounds like she was an amazing mother," Rachel said when Sophia finished. She was. "I think she would have liked knowing that Dad found someone who understands that loving new people doesn't mean forgetting the people you've lost." That evening, Vincent found Rachel on his penthouse balcony, wrapped in one of his coats and looking out over the city lights. "Thank you," he said, joining her in the crisp December air. "For what?" "For today. For understanding that grief isn't something to get over, it's something to integrate. For showing Sophia that love multiplies rather than diminishes." Rachel leaned against him, solid and warm in the cold night. "I love you both," she said simply, "not in spite of your complications, but including them. The grief, the anxiety, the late-night conversations about art and meaning, and whether it's possible to build something beautiful from broken pieces. All of it." Vincent felt something settle into place in his chest, not the desperate clutching of early love, but the steady certainty of partnership. "I love you too. We love you. And I think Elizabeth would approve of the family we're building together." Standing there under the winter stars, surrounded by the gentle noise of the city below, Vincent realized that his sister Margaret had been right about needing to start living again. She'd just been wrong about how it would happen. Love hadn't arrived through careful planning or strategic introductions. It had come through the back door, in the form of a schoolteacher who saw beauty in broken things and believed that healing happened best in community. The speed dating event felt like something that had happened to different people in a different lifetime. In its place stood something infinitely more precious. A love story built on understanding, patience, and the radical decision to choose each other every day, complications and all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.